22 billion euros. That's how much the fourth biggest car company on the planet lost in a single year. Not a rough quarter. Not a dip on a chart. A loss of 22.3 billion euros in 2025 alone, the first annual loss in the company's entire history. And here's the part that should stop you in your tracks. 1 year earlier, that same company posted a profit of 5.5 billion euros. From billions in the black, to the biggest hole in the history of the auto industry. In 12 months. The name is Stellantis. And even if you've never said that word out loud in your life, you already know its children. Fiat, Peugeot, Vauxhall, Citroën, Jeep, Alfa Romeo, Maserati, Chrysler, Lancia, DS. 14 brands, some of them over a century old, all sitting under one roof. And that roof just caved in. Today on Autostop Global, we're going to walk through exactly how an empire built to conquer the car world tore itself apart in under 5 years. How a plan that looked brilliant on a spreadsheet gutted 14 legendary brands from the inside, drove customers away in droves, forced out the man who built it, and ended in a 22 billion euro crater. Some of the names caught in this collapse are legends. That's what turns this from a bad year into a genuine tragedy. So get comfortable, and if you've ever owned one of these brands, stay until the end, because I want to hear your story in the comments. How the empire was built. To understand how far Stellantis has fallen, you first need to understand what it was supposed to become. Back in 2021, two struggling car giants decided the only way to survive was to merge. On one side, the French group PSA, which controlled Peugeot, Citroën, Vauxhall, Opel, and DS. On the other, Fiat Chrysler, bringing Fiat, Jeep, Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, Alfa Romeo, Lancia, and Maserati. Put all of that under one name, and overnight you had Stellantis. 14 brands. A footprint on nearly every continent on Earth. Instantly one of the largest automakers alive. The man running the show was Carlos Tavares. A hard-nosed Portuguese executive with a reputation as the most ruthless cost-cutter in the industry. This was the man who had already pulled Peugeot back from the edge of bankruptcy once before. His logic was simple. And on paper, it was almost impossible to argue with. Building cars is brutally, punishingly expensive. Developing a new platform, the bones underneath every vehicle, can cost billions of dollars. So why on earth would 14 separate brands each spend billions engineering their own bones from scratch? Merge the platforms. Share the engines. Slash the duplication. Print the money. Tavares wanted to build something big enough and lean enough to go toe-to-toe with Volkswagen and Toyota on their own turf. A true global giant, moving millions of cars a year, everywhere. And for a while, it worked exactly like he promised. The cost-cutting delivered enormous profits. Record margins. Wall Street loved him. The industry called him a genius, the sharpest operator in the business. But there was rot inside that plan from day one. And it's the exact same rot that has hollowed this company out to the bone. The rot underneath the spreadsheet. Here's the problem nobody wanted to say out loud while the profits were rolling in. When you force 14 brands to share the same platforms, the same engines, the same switches, the same seats, you save an absolute fortune. You also strip out the one thing that made each of those brands worth buying in the first place. An Alfa Romeo is supposed to feel completely different from a Vauxhall. A Maserati is supposed to feel like nothing else on the road, period. But when they're all pulled from the same parts bin as a budget Peugeot, that magic doesn't just fade. It disappears. The personality gets engineered out until all that's left is a badge stuck on a hood. And a badge, as Stellantis is discovering the hard way in 2026, is not enough to make someone sign a loan. The bet that broke the company. Then came the wager that finally broke everything. Electric vehicles. Tavares committed Stellantis to an aggressive, all-in electric future. Billions poured into electric vehicle platforms, battery supply, brand new production lines, all on the bet that demand was about to explode and Stellantis would be standing at the front of the line. It was the exact same bet Volkswagen made. the same bet Porsche made. And it has gone wrong for every single one of them in almost the identical way. The demand simply didn't show up at the pace they gambled on. Especially in the United States, where the political winds turned hard against electric vehicles almost overnight. Stellantis had built a future its own customers weren't ready to buy. And while the company was busy chasing that future, the present was quietly falling apart underneath it. 2024, the cracks become impossible to hide. By 2024, you couldn't paper over it anymore. Profits started collapsing. In the United States, dealers staged something close to an open revolt. A furious open letter went out accusing leadership of strangling the brands with arrogance and short-term greed, of jacking prices so high that cars were sitting unsold on the lot, gathering dust. The cost-cutting that had turned Tavares into a hero had gone too far. And the quality, the dealers, and the customers were the ones footing the bill. The board had finally seen enough. In December 2024, Carlos Tavares was forced out. And here's the detail that tells you exactly how fast this whole thing was unraveling underneath the surface. He got pushed out over 2024's performance. And 2024 was still, technically, a profit year. 5.5 billion euros in the black. The board panicked over a profit. Because they could already see what was coming next. February 2026, the reckoning. What came next was the reckoning. And it landed in February 2026. A new CEO, Antonio Filosa, had already taken over in the summer of 2025, and his first real job was brutal honesty. Face the mess directly, no spin. When the full-year results for 2025 finally came out, the scale of the disaster was laid bare for the entire industry to see. A net loss of 22.3 billion euros. The first annual loss in the company's entire history. The cause? A mountain of write-downs, more than 25 billion euros of them, much of it the value of that failed electric strategy getting wiped straight off the books. The same company that posted an operating profit of nearly 4 billion euros just 1 year earlier swung all the way to an operating loss. Revenue slid down to around 153 billion euros. And the cash position flipped, with money flowing out of the business instead of in, to the tune of billions. On top of all of that, Stellantis is now staring down a tariff bill running well over €1 billion for the year ahead, as trade barriers bite hard into everything it sells in America. And to try to protect whatever's left of the balance sheet, Stellantis suspended its dividend for 2026 entirely, and went to the bond markets to borrow up to €5 billion, just to keep the ship from taking on more water. Let that sink in for a second. One of the biggest car companies on earth, owner of 14 historic brands, lost €22 billion in a single year, and had to cancel its dividend and borrow money just to stay upright. That is not a company having a bad year. That is a company in crisis. But that headline number, shocking as it is, hides the real story. Because the true cost of this collapse isn't measured in 1 year's loss. It's measured in what's happened to the brands themselves. So let's walk through the wreckage, one legendary name at a time. Maserati, the crown jewel, bleeding out. Start with Maserati. The crown jewel. The brand that's supposed to be Stellantis' answer to Ferrari, the embodiment of Italian luxury and raw speed. Maserati sales have fallen off a cliff in a single year, and the brand has been hemorrhaging money ever since. Stellantis pulled back hard, slashing investment and canceling the electric future that was supposed to save it. A brand that should be the jewel of the entire empire has turned into a liability nobody seems to know how to fix. When the most glamorous name in your entire portfolio is bleeding cash and you're canceling its future, that tells you exactly how deep this trouble runs. Alfa Romeo. From racing pedigree to reliability nightmare. Now Alfa Romeo. A name that's supposed to make your pulse quicken. A century of racing pedigree and some of the most soulful cars ever built. Under Stellantis, Alfa has turned into a byword for unreliability, landing near the very bottom of independent dependability studies. Second worst of every single brand in one major survey. And the indignities keep piling up. When Alfa launched a new small car called the Milano, the Italian government objected that a car named after Milan wasn't even built in Italy. The company was forced into an embarrassing, last-minute rename. A proud, historic mark, reduced to building unreliable cars on shared platforms, and getting dragged into public fights over what it's even allowed to call them. Lancia, a legend on life support. Then there's Lancia. Once one of the most innovative and admired car makers on the planet. A brand that won rally championships and built genuine automotive icons. Today, Lancia has been reduced to essentially one single model. Kept alive on life support. A ghost of a brand that exists more as a name on paper than as a real, living car maker. The group keeps promising a revival. The reality is a once great name hanging by a thread. DS Automobiles, prestige you cannot fake. DS Automobiles tells a different kind of failure story. This was Stellantis trying to invent a premium French brand from scratch, an answer to Audi and BMW, built on the same ordinary bones as a Citroën but sold at a luxury price tag. Buyers saw straight through it. DS sells in tiny numbers across Europe, and its cars depreciate alarmingly because nobody wants them second-hand either. It stands as living proof that you cannot conjure prestige out of thin air and a badge. A premium brand only works if people actually believe in it. And nobody ever really believed in DS. Chrysler and Dodge, America left behind. Across the Atlantic, Chrysler is dying in slow motion. Once a pillar of the American car industry, it's been starved of investment for years and is now down to essentially one aging model. A brand that once defined American motoring, left to wither while the group's money and attention went somewhere else. And Dodge, the muscle car brand, was pushed so hard toward an electric future that its own diehard fans, the people who loved the noise and the fury, felt completely abandoned. It forced an awkward scramble back toward the combustion engines they should never have taken away in the first place. The pure tech scandal, the engine that eats itself. And then the volume brands. The ones that are actually supposed to pay the bills. And this is where the deepest scandal of them all is hiding. Peugeot, Citroën, Vauxhall, Opel, and DS all share a small three-cylinder gasoline engine called the PureTech. It's one of the most common engines fitted to cars across Europe over the last decade. When it launched, it was showered with Engine of the Year awards. Today, it's become one of the biggest engineering scandals in modern motoring. The problem is the timing belt, which on this engine sits soaking inside the engine oil. As the belt ages, it disintegrates, and rubber debris gets dragged through the whole system, clogging the oil pump pickup and starving the engine of lubrication until it seizes up completely. These failures are not rare, and they are not minor. Owners across Europe have been left holding repair bills worth more than the car itself, often on vehicles only a few years old. The anger got so widespread it triggered legal action in France and forced Stellantis to extend warranties on the engine just to try to contain the damage. Think about what that actually means. A company already under financial siege, bleeding billions, now also on the hook to replace engines in cars it already sold, because the cost-saving design at the heart of its best-selling models is destroying itself from within. This isn't a boardroom number on a spreadsheet. This is an ordinary family with a dead engine in a 5-year-old car, and a repair bill they were never warned about and can't afford. An award-winning engine that turned into a liability. That's the perfect symbol of everything that went wrong here. Vauxhall, Opel and Fiat, history treated as a line item. Vauxhall and Opel carry their own wound. As the losses mounted, Stellantis moved to shut a historic British plant, putting real livelihoods on the line and showing exactly where loyal, decades-long operations sit on the priority list once the accountants take over. A brand woven into British motoring history, treated like a line item to cut. And Fiat. The founding heart of the entire empire. The brand that put Italy on wheels and gave the world the little 500. Hollowed out too. Its lineup has shrunk to a small handful of models. The electric 500, meant to be the bright new future, was priced so high and sold so slowly that production was repeatedly paused. A brand that once dominated Italy and sold across the whole of Europe, reduced to running on fumes and nostalgia. When even the company's own namesake is struggling to stay relevant, you understand exactly how deep the decay has gone. A disease bigger than one company. Step back and look at the whole picture, and the pattern is impossible to miss. 14 brands, each with its own history, its own soul, all fed into the same machine. The machine squeezed out the costs, and with them, the character. Maserati's glamour. Alfa's passion. Launch's innovation. Chrysler's heritage. All of it sacrificed on the altar of a spreadsheet. And the customers, who could feel the difference even if they couldn't name it, started walking away. The badges stayed exactly where they were. The magic did not. Here's the part that should worry everyone watching this, because Stellantis is not alone in this. This is the same disease tearing through the entire industry right now. Volkswagen Group made the identical bet, merging its brands onto shared platforms and gambling everything on an electric future that arrived far too slowly. It's bleeding too. Porsche, the most profitable luxury automaker on the planet, made the same electric bet and watched its own profits collapse. The pattern keeps repeating because the thinking was the same everywhere. Cut costs by sharing everything. Chase the electric future faster than customers actually want to go. Trust the badge to carry you through anyway. And everywhere it's been tried at this scale, it has ended the same way. Lost character. Lost trust. Lost billions. Stellantis just happens to be the most extreme example, because it tried to do it across 14 brands, all at once. The bigger the empire, the bigger the fall. Where does it go from here? So where does that leave Stellantis right now? The new leadership is trying to dig its way out of the hole. And the strategy this time is the exact opposite of what came before. Instead of forcing everyone toward electric no matter what, the new message is freedom to choose. Keeping gasoline, hybrid, and electric options alive across the range, all at once. The company is leaning hard on its strongest survivors, Jeep and Ram in America, hoping they can drag the rest of the group back toward profit. There are early, cautious signs of life in the second half of the year. A little revenue growth. A slightly steadier ship. The bosses are talking about closing the gaps of the past and clawing back toward profitable growth. Maybe it works. Empires have crawled back from worse before. But look at the sheer scale of what actually has to be repaired. 14 brands, several of them gutted of everything that ever made them special. A volume engine that turned into a public scandal. A premium brand nobody believes in. A luxury brand still bleeding cash. A legendary name down to a single model. An American icon left to wither on the vine. A €22 billion hole in the accounts. A cancelled dividend. And billions borrowed just to keep the balance sheet standing upright. You don't fix that with one decent half year and an optimistic press release. You fix it by rebuilding trust, brand by brand, customer by customer. And that takes years, if it can be done at all. The hard truth. Here's the hard truth sitting at the center of all of this. Stellantis wasn't killed by Toyota. It wasn't killed by the Chinese automakers, and it wasn't killed by a recession. It was built on a single idea. That you could merge 14 proud brands, strip out everything that made them different to save money, and the customers would simply never notice. Well, the customers noticed. They noticed the shared parts. They noticed the lost character. They noticed the cost-cut quality, and they absolutely noticed the engine that destroys itself from the inside out. And one by one, they walked away, until the fourth biggest car company on earth was staring down the biggest loss it had ever recorded. The names will probably survive on paper. Fiat, Peugeot, Alfa, Maserati. Those badges are too valuable to simply throw in the trash. But whether they ever feel like the cars they once were again, whether there's any soul left worth rescuing after years inside this machine, that's the question hanging over the entire empire right now. And at this moment, nobody, not even the people running the company, can answer that with any real confidence. So I want to know your opinion. Have you ever owned a car from any of these brands? Vauxhall, Peugeot, Alfa Romeo, or Fiat? Did you witness the decline in quality firsthand? And of all the brands we just mentioned, which of these once great brands do you think has disappeared forever? Tell me in the comments, because among all of us watching this, we've probably owned cars from all these brands. And your stories are real-life testimony to what actually happened. And if you want to see 5 more brands that are on the verge of collapse, check out this video I made on the channel. Click on it and learn the reasons why they're on the brink.